And I said, what? There are two of us? And he said, yes, he's from a place called Perth. And I'm like, whoa, this is racist. I think that it goes back to the theme of your book, Ron, the Lonely Libertarian. You know, it can get very lonely in the world, and you can feel very isolated having a viewpoint that believes in limited government and not having overreach and having individual sovereignty. So I think that what Ron has created here at Mancow, where he sends hundreds of people overseas every year to learn about ideas of free enterprise and individual sovereignty, is just incredible. And you have created the most wonderful community and village, and I just think it's so great. So let's just give a hand to Ron Manners, who's an amazing human being. Ron, you want to hop up here? We'll get started and talk about your book. And I'm not sure who's read it already, but I thought it was wonderful. And wonderful because you talk about a lot of your escapades. And I know at the start of the book you opened up and you said how uncomfortable it made you when someone suggested you write another book, because your previous book they said, well, you just talked about other people. You know, why don't you do one that talks about yourself? And you said, well, because that makes me supremely uncomfortable. And I just think the stories you share about your life in this book are so wonderful. And we'll go through a little bit. But let's start off. I wanted to just maybe as we open up, because your book is about wisdom, it's about surviving in a world where your ideas may not be popular or common, and it's about sort of fighting for what you believe in as well. And you've got some great nuggets, mind the pun, of wisdom in there. So let's start off just with some advice. I know that you mentor all the people at Mancow and you send them off around the world, but what is some general advice that you would give to young people these days for success, etc.?
I think that's a weird question. I learn so much more from these young people than they'll ever learn from me. It's just called rational selfishness, all the stuff that I'm learning all the time from them. But I guess the most a common question that I'm asked is, if there's one thing they should concentrate on to make their lives successful, what is it? And I think the one thing that I mentioned they should concentrate on is developing their character. But they look at me in bewilderment. Nobody talks about character. That's not ever mentioned at the universities. They said, well, what is character? Now, I had to think a bit about this, and I think it's three things. If they can develop trust, that's one of the three things. But if you can develop trust, people will invite you onto a board, or they'll invite you into a syndicate, or they'll want to do business with you if you've developed trust. And the second thing is knowledge. Without knowledge, you really don't know what you're talking about, so nobody wants to know you anyway. But all those things, you can have all the knowledge in the world and all the trust in the world, but just that doesn't work. Still, nothing happens unless you've got the courage to go and do something with that knowledge and that trust that you developed. You've got to, the executing your goals, whether it be drilling a drill hole in your search for minerals, or starting a start-up company to get your product going, or writing a book, you've got to do it. You've got to do it. So they're the three things. You put trust together with knowledge and together with the courage to actually go and do it, then you probably won't end up on the dole at the end. So I think they seem to be happy with that answer. So that's the best I can do.
Won't end up on the dole. Tips from Ron. So I wanted to bring up something that you mentioned in your book. Page 17, you say, money is a real friend if you can put it to work usefully. And this sort of stuck out to me because, in my opinion, I don't know about you guys, but the economy's not looking too crash hot right now. You've had yield curves inverting. You'd have, negative interest rates all over the world. You have cash bans in Australia trying to force us into banks. Like, it's just not. The omens don't look too good for the way the world's economy is going. So I kind of want to start with that question, but maybe move a bit further. Like, how do we get our money to work for us, but how do we also safeguard our wealth in what may be, a disastrous oncoming crash that a lot of people are suggesting is imminent?
I think there will be a crash. It'll be a disastrous thing when it happens, but like politicians, we all sit back and think, that's okay. It'll be on the next guy's in the next term of government. We don't have to worry about it too much. But I think it would be a crash. I think you've got to be a bit bulletproof. And there's a whole generation of people. Mancal is funding a program over at RMIT in Melbourne. It's called the Tools for Freedom. I think it's developing a whole lot of tools that will help those, what we call the digital nomads, that they can, with Bitcoin and all the other facilities of dealing internationally, they will facilitate those people who can live in one country, work in another country, and invest in a third country, and that way they can get the best of those three elements of life. It sounds a bit bizarre, but it's the only reason I'm optimistic is that you can now do it, and I know that we've done it here. I've got e-residency for a tiny country called Estonia, and they're 10 years ahead of Australia with e-commerce. And when I visited there the first time, it was like visiting the future, seeing how people dealt with each other. The politicians don't go into Parliament to vote; they just vote on their iPhone. The whole community is electronic. They vote electronically. They get a tax bill once a year, flat rate tax, no deductions. There's no such thing as a tax account in the whole country. It's just, and no wonder people are registering companies there. I believe there's 6,100 Australians who've got e-residency for Estonia. There's 48,000 people around the world with Estonian e-residency. And the other day, Judy challenged me. She said, "You've had Estonia residency for 2 years, what are you going to do about it?" So we walked up the computer, plugged the card in, and in 10 minutes we registered a not-for-profit. We laughingly call it the Roncal Foundation. I can remember the name of it. And it was like as easy as buying a book on Amazon. It was just
Sort of,
yeah. And we had to think of, you had to think of articles, memorandum articles. Well, it's pretty much like Mancal, so I just remembered the words. So this is encouraging. The young people are now embracing this, and that stuff coming out of RMIT, we'll have the full report on it before the end of the year, will enable people to have this, what they call digital nomads, and that'll break down if they feel uncomfortable with overburden of regulations. They can still live in Australia, best country in the world to live. I think it's just fantastic. That's why we're here. And but you don't have to put up with that stuff that's crap. You can register your company somewhere else. You can pay tax somewhere else. Whatever it is, you got to pay tax somewhere. Otherwise it's terrible being a tax avoiding sort of a soul. So. But at least we got the choice of where to pay tax. I mean, it's freedom of choice is something we really believe in, and that's why I'm an optimist. We got some freedoms left.
I love that you really pushed down the tax avoiders there. We'll talk about your 7 fugitive years in a moment, Ron. So I wanted to bring up a quote talking about e-residency and everything that you mentioned there. It sounds really interesting. You were very optimistic in the book, saying that, as you just mentioned, you can live in one country, you can work in another country, you can invest in the country altogether. And so you have this quote to say that others will recognise the benefits of internationalising themselves. There is no such country that is simultaneously the best country in which to live, invest and work. The solution is to select a different country for each of these 3 functions of living, investing and working. And you talk a lot about the disruption in the tech industry and how that's helping change the world, and you're very optimistic because of that reason. They've seen things like Uber, for example, that completely shook up the taxi industry. I've seen things like Bitcoin that you mentioned in passing that allows people to have unconfiscatable assets. So maybe just elaborate a little on that and about these digital nomads that you mentioned. Is there advice you would give to us? Like right now, if we were to make the most of all the things different countries have to offer, do you have advice for where we should go for what?
Well, no, the answer will be different to every single person because we're all delightfully different. So I think that's the only advice is go for it. Just be part of this opportunity that my parents and my grandparents would have never dreamt of. That we have options, like where do we want to register a company, where do we want to pay tax? You know, I think this is a joy. You know, the fact that we've got these choices in front of us. I think that we just got to grab it. Look what Uber's done to the transport industry. I mean, it's a pleasure to step out of the office and jump in an Uber. You're talking to somebody intelligent who's virtually running their own business. It's their own car. They keep it clean. They make sure you leave it clean because they're gonna mark you just the same as you mark them when you finish the trip. Hasn't that revolutionised transport? Well, we'll see the same thing with local government. We'll see the same thing with state government. We'll see the same thing with national government, where there's competition, and the real competition, not this dreadful thing they call harmonisation, where they get together and they club together. They say make everyone pay the same tax wherever they are. Let's compete. They should be competing with our support, and we love it.
That was a great part of the book where you're talking about not just disruption of tech, which everyone talks about. It's like the buzzword of the century, disrupt tech, but disrupting governments is really interesting. And you talk about, you know, nations and countries themselves will be disrupted, that you'll have young people being born today who are going to have a completely different understanding of what it means to be governed. And I think that that's really interesting. You see a lot of, you know, governance on the blockchain, for example. You have e-residencies in Estonia. You have options now, as you mentioned, where you don't have to be pegged into a certain area. You get choice now. You can choose and use the world as your oyster and go to wherever offers the best deal. And I think that people are going to start voting with their feet.
Well, I think there's a whole new wave of things where people look. I think the next generation will look at government, and they'll have an entirely different idea of what government should be doing for them to what previous generations have had. I think the older generation always felt the government was good, and Mike, I'm sure you'll agree with me. The government is good because when we get to old age, the government's going to look after us. Yeah, it was pretty fashionable. Didn't bloody work. so I mean, they've let us down. I mean, the taxi industry paid protection money to the state government to protect them from competition. It was called taxi medallions. They paid $500,000 so the state government would not allow anyone to compete with the taxis. Didn't work. And now the state government's penalising us, trying to get us to pay a 10% levy to pay off the promises that they couldn't keep. All this, I think, is very interesting.
So I wanted to now move to the theme of loneliness in the book, the Lonely Libertarian, and what that means. Because you've got the front cover of this book and you're surrounded by this amazing community that you've built here at Mancow, which is really nice. But you start off the book and you say, it is better to be lonely than to be wrong. Going along with the mob just for the sake of being popular often means being surrounded by people without the ability to reason clearly. And I loved that quote, and that's sort of why you can see that people might be lonely if they have these ideas, if they're just going along with, you know, what the mainstream thinks. But you mentioned this Ayn Rand quote, and as soon as you said that, I was like, he's gonna give her quote about loneliness. You didn't. You said the quote is, achieving life is not the equivalent of avoiding death, and that's fantastic. But there's another quote from Ayn Rand where she says, those touchy mediocrities who sit trembling lest someone's work prove greater than their own. They have no inkling of the loneliness that comes when you reach the top. The loneliness for an equal, for a mind to respect, and an achievement to admire. And it sort of links this whole theme in your book, this idea of not having people to share these ideas with who may not have thought about them or may not have learned about them in school, because we don't learn about these ideas these days. But just talk to me about loneliness and this image on the front cover where you're surrounded by wonderful people.
This is a classic example of how I learned from the younger generation. I didn't know about that quote. What a beauty. So I was just soaking it up. But there's the book, you know, surrounded by people. They're all libertarians, but every one of them is lonely. Every one of them knows exactly what I'm talking about. Anyone today in Australia particularly, doesn't matter how well researched that they've come to a conclusion, if they stand up and voice an opinion, they've got a fair chance of getting their head kicked in. Then they'll experience a good solid dose of loneliness. So anyone that expresses an opinion knows exactly what I'm talking about, the lonely libertarian. Put your head in, say nothing, you get really popular.
And it's sort of, I mean, that's what happened to me. Like, I didn't know what a libertarian was when I was in Australia, where I moved to America like 9 years ago, and I heard of, saw this community, and I was like, oh my God, America, they have this community. They have these people that congregate, and they have these think tanks, and they're talking about this stuff. And then I met you, and I saw what you've created in Australia, and it's just so wonderful to see that, and everything that's been built over the past few years here at Mancal. It's really incredible, this community. So what's been your favourite part of creating all of this and building up this family here in Australia?
Well, it's easy. It's coming to work in the morning and not having to ask anyone, have you done this or have you done something else? They've all done it. It's all happened. They're all one jump ahead of me. So that's the thing I enjoy. It's just 3 times in my life I've had the right team. And we've achieved amazing things, and this is the 3rd time, and bring it on. I just love it. Simple answer to your question.
It's a good answer. And so we're running out of time here. I did want to bring up, because you mentioned Hong Kong, and you're going there for your next book launch, which is really exciting, that all the things going on in Hong Kong right now, it breaks my heart. I think Hong Kong has been like this giant miracle of the past few decades, and to see what's going on there at the moment is really disheartening. But you actually mention in your book, and it was Bill Stacey who brought it up in the foreword, mentions a comparison that you've drawn between Hong Kong and Kalgoorlie. And so it says that, you don't have the luxury of standing still in either of these places. They discover and assemble what is needed for success with new prices in a different world. And it says this unusual transcendence of their economic base comes from values of self-reliance. Survival, dramatic change and progress for both cities don't come from benevolent government, but from the adaptation by individuals and their enterprises, despite the impediments of governments and the self-proclaimed wisdom of misguided intellectuals. So I would love your thoughts on what's going on over there at the moment, if you still think that they have this ability to be resilient in such a tough climate that they're facing right now.
That's a tough one. I think the courage of the young people in Hong Kong has been extraordinary. I wonder if we had the same situation here, whether our young people would be as courageous as to go to the streets as they do. I'll know more about it after I've been there. But I think why I said that about Hong Kong was that they're both cities where things have happened to them over the years. I mean, in Kalgoorlie, for instance, we were mining gold early last century, and then the government put a cap on gold, pegged it at $35 an ounce for about 80 years or so. That killed the gold mining industry. So, with a bit of vision, some guys put a company called Western Mining together and went and found nickel. So we became a pretty aggressive nickel centre of the nickel industry, pretty much. And then when the nickel price fell over, that was about the time, just not long after President Nixon broke the gold window, and gold started taking a move up. So and then they broke the link with the dollar, and we all went and looked for gold. So we moved around, went for nickel, looking for gold. We found gold, and now it's the gold capital. I think Hong Kong's a little bit like that. It was the opium capital of the world for a while, and then that became unpopular, so they became a commerce popular. They had a guy running it called Sir John Cowperthwaite, running it for the British Empire, and he refused to send statistics back to head office in London. And his bosses back in London said, well, yeah, come on, you're in charge, you've got to send the statistics back. And he said, no, I refuse to send any information back to London, because once you get that information in your possession, you'll start interfering.
Yeah.
So Hong Kong roared. It was a huge success, and that's a success it still is up until today. But I'm fearful that Big Brother can't resist exerting that heavy-handed control over it. It'll be sad. but we'll look for other areas that will emerge around the world that'll be the new Hong Kongs of the world, and this is what happens. You stamp something out, something rises up to take its place. So, forever optimist. That's me.
And we may be entering a new era where more and more of our lives, as you said, you know, we've become these decentralized beings. We're not like rooted to the spot in one country where we have to do everything in that country. We now have international money that can be instantly sent overseas in the form of cryptocurrency. You have e-residencies over the world.
We're talking to Miss Bitcoin herself.
Yeah.
Right, if you see any Bitcoin advertisements on YouTube, there's Naomi right up in the front there, so she knows the stuff, along with Ian Love over there. They're the Bitcoin experts in Australia at the moment. So yeah, it all helps. It all helps. Like, hey, what a great time at which we just happen to be living. You just can't help smiling, can you? And putting the book together nearly killed me, but if it's any help to you at all, it's been worth it. And it'll be my absolute pleasure to sign copies for every one of you. And I've said somewhere, it's the sort of book that young people should buy for their parents, and parents should buy for their young people. Thank you, Naomi.